Now finally, I want to show you these. 4 volumes. Every one of them are about 1,000 pages, 700 to 1,000 pages. This series is by Jack M. Sasson, one of the premier biblical scholars and archaeologists. He has gathered dozens of scholars together. Civilizations of the ancient Near East. 4 volumes. I just want to show you the mass of materials that we have before us on the ancient Near East. Sasson, anybody who studies archaeology is going to recognize this name. In his first volume, here's what he says, however. Dates of kings, dynasties, empires, events, and eras are not all agreed upon by scholars of the ancient Near East. That's page 23 of the preface. In the introduction, he says, in the past half century alone, just 50 years, my lifetime, major discoveries of urban centers, archives, ancient environments, and significant monuments have occurred that are revolutionizing our grasp of cultural developments throughout the ancient Near East. Serious debate about the meaning and interpretation of such discoveries are taking place. There is no proof yet. We just have a ton of knowledge to sift through. Archaeology does not have the last word. Page 27. When it comes to setting time closures for the civilizations of Western Asia and North Africa, there are no readily accepted conventions. Page 30. We are so distant, intellectually and emotionally, from the ancient Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Hittites, and Hebrews, that to bridge the vast gaps separating us, we turn to the remains of their languages, the texts, and of their material culture, settlements, tombs, artifacts, and works of art. But to master these remains, to make documents or artifacts tell us something plausible and useful, you notice he's not saying they prove finality. The subject of archaeology and history is plausibility. That's as far as we can go. And in order for these to tell us something plausible and useful about the people that created them, it requires an intimate knowledge of what they have left us, a discriminating empathy with their concerns, and an honest recognition of the many ways in which they differ from us. When it comes to deciphering evidence from the ancient world, especially important is we are not yet at a stage where one interpretation is so authoritative that it is beyond challenge or modification. Everything is up in the air and questionable. We stand at a particularly creative interval in portraying ancient cultures when responsible scholars can pore over the same set of data and yet reach different conclusions. So the data itself has to be interpreted. It doesn't prove a thing, and there's different conclusions. Near Eastern scholars are a particularly ornery breed. But because an expanding panoply of fruitful methodologies is now available in which to analyze any evidence from the past societies, and it creates information from data that's already gathered, it's not just that we now have new approaches and theories, but we are better prepared to ask the right questions. We haven't even been asking the right questions in the past. Now we can begin to do that. That is what these 4 huge tomes are doing. You can see page after page after page after page after thousands of pages of material. Have any of my viewers read these 4 volumes yet? I haven't even had a chance to read all the way through them. I've been studying them off and on through the last several years, but I still haven't got it completely read. This is stuff we don't know. None of the scholars in here are saying we have final answers and proof, however. It's an ongoing interpretation and understanding. archaeology does not prove the Bible as such. That's not its function. Now, another superb Bible scholar, Paul W. Lapp, Biblical Archaeology and History. This was his lectures, Schweitz Lectures, quite a few years ago. This particular text is a 1969 text, but listen to what Paul Lapp has to say about the general philosophy and the basic understanding, which is still the dominant theme in biblical archaeology. On page 22, he says, we must emphasize archaeology's limitations. In order to properly understand their own discipline, they have to know the parameters they can work within. This is rational. This is realistic. That way we don't begin teaching fairy tales. It is only when written documents appear that history begins for an archaeologist. Much of the archaeological material from the biblical period in Palestine cannot be related directly to texts, and so it remains sub-historical, he says. Archaeology remains a secondary historical discipline, although at times it does produce primary historical documents. On page 25, after defining his subject, the historian must delimit and critically examine his sources. With an ancient source like the Bible, the task of critical examination is fairly obvious. Statements about the sun standing still, or sticks turning to serpents, and angels slaying armies, these require critical understanding. The task is not an easy one. There is no clear-cut method or set of principles by which the authentic elements in variant accounts can be determined with any kind of scholarly consensus. Did you get that? That is important. We don't have the means right now to come to full agreement on what the Bible means, even though we have a horde of archaeological materials. Archaeology does not prove the Bible true. Those who make that kind of an argument are ignorant of both the Bible and archaeology. They've got to quit making that kind of an argument. The archaeologists will completely destroy your pet theory. They already have. You're just not reading them. Isn't it the rational thing to do? I can't think of a better methodology. Can you? If someone can think up a better methodology than what I'm doing right here in these videos, I'm glad to hear it. If you're going to study archaeology, then go get the archaeologists. If you're going to study biblical archaeology, then go find out from the biblical archaeologists what they say about archaeology in the Bible and ancient history. That's rational. That's real. That's what we're doing here. That's what the backyard professor does. When a claim is made, test the claim. Find out for yourselves. Think for yourselves. Don't just accept it because someone else says it. I don't even care if that someone else is a seriously respected minister of your community. If the ministers are teaching this idea that archaeology proves the Bible, it's time to stop. It's a false idea. It is not real. Not according to the experts. Well, page 35. The Christian Bible is a source book of history. It is not a book of history. Although it provides the chief and sometimes the only sources for the history of Palestine and sometimes in the biblical period, it was not written as a history, and is best it's a compilation of sources. That is what the Bible is. That's the down-to-earth, rational, realistic explanation of the Bible. Unfortunately for historians and for us, the biblical sources were not simply written down. Most of them passed through centuries of written transmission and re-editing, and before that some of them had passed down through even longer periods of oral transmission. It is generally agreed by biblical scholars that the earliest editor, or the redactor, worked at least some 400 years before the last redactor of the Bible. And some of the events described are commonly assigned to a period in the Bible at least 800 years before the time of the first editor,